Alrighty guys, so today I wanted to talk about my experiences going from Nvidia to Radeon for 2 years and recently switching back to Nvidia. Now originally I had a 1080 Ti in my gaming PC, used that for about 5 years, but it started to struggle at 1440p gaming, so I ended up switching to the 6900 XT. Now we are talking about the Red Devil Ultimate 6900 XT, and man, do I gotta say, it was a bumpy ride. Now, I think it's important to establish that I am not a fan of Radeon or Intel or Nvidia. I am a fan of what works. And spoiler alert, it really comes down to what you want to do with your graphics card. Now, with the Radeon card, I knew that the encoder chip in the graphics card was worse than Nvidia's. So that's why I went with the 5950X, so I could use that to encode my stream while I'm gaming, and then I can encode my recordings with the 6900 XT, because at that high of a bit rate, it doesn't even matter. They look identical. The only time you're going to notice the difference between the Nvidia encoder and the AMD encoder is when you're streaming on something like Twitch, where your bitrate is extremely low. Now let's go ahead and talk about the issues in which I had with the 6900 XT. Now, as far as gaming performance, 6900 XT is an amazing 1440p gaming card. Super high FPS and everything, as long as you stay away from ray tracing. If you touch anything with ray tracing, it is going to smash your FPS. And this is true even with the current Nvidia cards as well. You're going to take a significant FPS hit, but AMD, it's your FPS is going down into the gutter, man. Now, ray tracing performance was not a selling point for me, even to this day, but driver stability is. Now, for the first year I had the 6900 XT, my problems were user-caused, mess around with overclocks and installing a power supply that was not over 900 watts. Yes, the Red Devil Ultimate 6900 XT requires a 900 watt plus power supply because it has massive power spikes. Now, I had an 850 watt power supply, and it ultimately resulted in that power supply dying. But hey, that's how you learn. This was my first PC I ever built, and that's just part of the learning process. For the first year, it was really only driver crashes resulting in my whole PC restarting, which is a massive bummer, especially when you're doing videos, editing, or streaming, and all of a sudden your whole PC just boop, restarts. There goes everything you were just doing. Oh well. But then, about a year before the 7000 series Radeon GPUs launched, AMD stopped putting out recommended drivers and was only putting out optional drivers. Now, the difference is with recommended drivers, they have to go through AMD's quality checks to make sure they're stable and everything is functioning properly. The optional drivers do not have to go through any quality checks. Now, these Radeon drivers caused all kinds of problems. Most notably, and I'm going to show you guys a clip here, when Modern Warfare 2 launched, we were in the middle of these optional drivers getting tossed out all the time with all these issues. Now, this is a clip from one Call of Duty match where I black screened, I think 6 or 7 times. I'm not sure. You can see the FPS was great. I was like on 130 plus FPS, 120, 130 FPS. Max 1440p, performing amazing, but these black screens made the game absolutely unplayable. Now, you guys might say, hey, why didn't you just roll back the driver to one, an old recommended driver? Well, guess what, guys? For whatever reason, Call of Duty said if you don't have the latest driver installed, you cannot launch the game. What would happen is when you'd go to launch it, it would say, install the latest driver, you can't play, and then it would force close the game. There was no way to get around this. So it forced you to install the broken optional drivers. Now, this was an absolutely massive hit to my confidence in Radeon, as these drivers were just bad. I mean, black screening like crazy, made Call of Duty unplayable, made other games unplayable, and this persisted up until about a month or two before the 7000 series Radeon cards launched, and AMD started coming out with their recommended drivers once again. Now, this solved the black screening issue completely. I haven't had a single one since the 7000 series launched, but then I ran into an issue where DaVinci Resolve, when you would launch it, would continuously call for more and more VRAM over about a minute to 5 minutes, and then it would max out your VRAM, which is 16 gigs on my 6900 XT, causing DaVinci Resolve to run at like 1 or 2 FPS, completely unusable. So I'd roll the drivers back, and then I would have to update the drivers again whenever I'd want to play Call of Duty. As you can imagine, this was pretty frustrating, but eventually this got solved. Now this brings us to the last issue I had with the Radeon 6900 XT before I switched back to Nvidia. Now keep in mind, up until the day I uninstalled the 6900 XT, the driver crashes resulting in my PC completely restarting persisted. Since I got the card, up until I uninstalled the card, that issue stayed. It wasn't very frequent, like once a month, maybe once every 2 months, but it was still there. Now, as you can imagine, that's pretty frustrating when you pay top dollar for a top tier card and you've had all of these issues over 2 years. But the last one was when I tried to revisit Red Dead Redemption 2 because I'm currently going back and trying to finish all the games in which I have abandoned, which there is a lot. But in Red Dead Redemption 2, I could only play between 5 and 10 minutes because it was doing the same thing as DaVinci Resolve, where the VRAM usage would continuously keep jumping and jumping and jumping until it would max out at 16 gigs, and then the game would crash, and it would just happen over and over and over again. And I said, okay, that is enough. I'm tired of this instability. That's the final straw. We're switching back to Nvidia. Now, since installing the Gigabyte Gaming Overclock 4080, I've noticed a massive difference in temperature. Now, the 6900 XT was hitting around 78 to 75 degrees, somewhere in there when gaming with unclocked frame rates, max 1440p. Now, the 4080, I have yet to see it hit 60 degrees. Now, this is largely in part to it having that massive 4090 cooler on there. I know a lot of people hate that these cards are getting so big, but hey, I'm happy, dude. It's keeping my room cool. It's keeping my PC cool. And honestly, it's going to lead to a longer lifespan of the card because it's staying so much cooler. Now, as far as content creation, Nvidia is known for being more friendly. Most notably, RTX background remover, which is what I'm using right now, has been absolutely amazing. I have no green screen behind me at all. I just installed this from Nvidia's website and enabled it in OBS, and bada bing, bada boom. You know, it does sometimes get some pop in, but it is vastly better than any plugins that I've tried in OBS with my 6900 XT, and there's been no noticeable performance hit with RTX background remover enabled. Now, as far as the encoder chips at low bit rates, for instance, like streaming on Twitch where you're at like 6 to 8K on your bit rate, you're going to notice a difference between the Radeon and Nvidia encoder chip. But when we're talking about streaming on YouTube or recording for YouTube or other sites where you can throw as much bitrate as you want, you're going to notice absolutely no difference between the Radeon and Nvidia chips. Now, it is notable that I think anything from the 4070 Ti and above gets dual encoder chips. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I know how those work. I think they allow you to do 2 projects at once, or they can both work on the same one, doubling the speed and performance. I don't know. I just know that they work, and I'm happy with them. Now, I did run into one notable issue with the 4080. Now, I was able to eventually figure out this problem. Basically, when I would play any game, when the game would load, or I'd load a save, or any sort of loading would happen in the game, my second monitor would start stuttering like crazy until that loading was done. Now, I had no idea what the heck was happening. I thought my NVMe was dying. It was actually pretty annoying because I would have, I don't know, a stream up on the second monitor, you know, and I'm just grinding Pal World or doing whatever, and every time this game would load, this whole monitor would just get discombobulated and drop to like 1 FPS. Now, I actually reinstalled the driver, wiped everything with DDU, reinstalled the drivers a couple times because I thought maybe it was some sort of driver issue. And I was like, oh, you know what? They'll just fix it in the next update. Now, what I believe happened is when I popped in my 4080, my main monitor has Gsync. So it automatically enabled Gsync. So whenever a game would load or save, or I'd launch a game, my FPS would drop to, I don't know, 1 FPS, let's just say, because it's loading, doing whatever the heck it does. And it was causing my second monitor to match that frame rate with Gsync. And that's why my second monitor was stuttering and basically dropping to the 1 FPS that my main monitor was doing. I said, you know what? Let's just disable Gsync and see what happens. Now everything runs absolutely smooth. Second monitor has no issues. Main monitor has no issues. I've had no black screens with any Nvidia card, not even my 1080 Ti. No driver crashes resulting in my PC restarting. No heat problems. I mean, this 4080 has been absolutely amazing. Now, as far as gaming performance, both the 6900 XT and 4080 are amazing 1440p cards. They can also both do 4K. As far as ray tracing, I pretty much would never touch it on the 6900 XT because it would just obliterate that card. With the 4080, I throw it on whenever I can, and I still get great FPS. Now, I will say a notable difference is with the Radeon card. A very prominent thing people say is they get higher highs and lower lows, and that is very true. With the Radeon card, you get a very roller coaster-like FPS, meaning, man, you'll hit Omega High, Mount Everest levels, and then boom, 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 jumping up and down like a crazy stinking roller coaster, or you're like on a trampoline, right? With the 4080, you're getting a much smaller range of FPS, meaning you're only jumping in a very small range, which ultimately gives you a much more smooth gameplay experience. Now, in conclusion, both Radeon and Nvidia make some amazing graphics cards. It really just comes down to what you're looking for as a buyer. If you're just a gamer and you just want a solid card to game on and you don't care about content creation or editing or streaming and you don't care about ray tracing, then Radeon is amazing. They have by far the best price to performance. Now, if you are someone that is interested in content creation or workflow tasks, or you are a content creator, or you are massive into ray tracing and getting the best possible graphics, then I highly recommend Nvidia. You get a much more stable experience with many more goodies for content creation and editing, and you get those dual encoder chips. Now, will I ever go back to Radeon? Absolutely not. Not because I hate Radeon, not because they're terrible, they just do not meet my personal needs. Would I recommend Radeon? Absolutely. If you're just a gamer, I 100% recommend Radeon. They have by far the best performance to cost ratio. Alrighty guys, thank you very much for watching. Greatly appreciate it. Hopefully you guys have an amazing stinking day, and I hope to see you guys on the next one.